Like so many things, there's nothing prettier than a motherboard with all of its PCI slots utilized at the same time. In this case, we decided to stuff ours with 4 Radeon R9 290Xs. We couldn't decide which cooler we liked the most, so we used one of each. Welcome to NCIX Crazy Crossfire Shenanigans. After many tedious hours, NCIX Anthony was able to find the 4 highest overclocking cards out of all the 290Xs that they had on hand. An MSI Twin Frozer, MSI Lightning, reference AMD engineering sample, and an XFX double dissipation, and then tossed them all in one rig for the purpose of tackling the 3D Mark leaderboards. Now, the idea of using 780 Ti's instead was kicked around, but with the recent price drops on the Radeon lineup, this is some pretty impressive bang for the buck. Now, let's have a look at these results, which Anthony is very, very proud of and insisted that I show you guys. So, top 100, that's almost like being in the top 10, except not as much, which is almost like being in the top 3, which is except not as much. So, unfortunately, it's not that much of an achievement, Anthony. I've been higher than that on the 3D Mark leaderboards before, but good job. Anyway. Although the 780 Ti is still faster overall, the 290X is able to trade punches with it pretty closely in some games, and in fact, without any overclocking, that is how that 86th worldwide score of 14,492 was reached. Now, if you do want to do any overclocking, and you want to power such a monstrous configuration like this, you're going to need a pretty serious business power supply. So Anthony opted for Corsair's new flagship AX1500i. It's an 80+ titanium unit, and at times like this, we're thankful that it can supply up to 125 amps on its single 12-volt rail. Now, surprisingly, the system still only draws about 1,000 watts from the wall under full load. However, with AMD's ultra-low power saving mode, etc., the cards can clock down to 300 megahertz, and the system only draws 120 watts total when at idle. The most amazing part of all that is that the cooling fan stays off most of the time on that power supply, which is a testament to just how efficient it is. So while you might be looking at it going, okay, if it doesn't draw more than 1,000 watts, why would I ever need a 1,500 watt power supply? The answer is you don't really, but if you really wanted that silence, then that's the way to do it. Now, all of this was connected to an MSI Z97 X-Power AC motherboard with its military-class electrical components and 4 PCIe 8X lanes with additional power input. This was the board of choice for the ultimate quad Crossfire X showcase. The rest of the components include an Intel 4790K processor, 32 gigs of HyperX Fury memory, and a Samsung 840 Pro SSD. Now, as many viewers know by now, the standard go-to game for benchmarking around here is Battlefield 4 on the Ultra preset, which is pretty demanding and scales beautifully with hardware. So at 1080p, yeah, I mean, this is not a challenge. In fact, the average FPS is 170 with dips into the 140s. If you had triple 1080p monitors, then you'd be running at a smooth 91 FPS average and would be able to take full advantage of 144 hertz monitors if you were just using one for like super smooth motion, even in Battlefield 4. But let's face it, the best matchup for a setup like this is a 4K monitor. So with an average of 76 FPS and a minimum of 53, a single 4K monitor is no challenge either. Now, I know everyone will be asking about triple 4K, but it's actually not possible with this combination right now. 290X cards only come with 2 DVI, 1 HDMI, and 1 DisplayPort output. That means that we can have a maximum of 2 4K monitors unless we wanted one of them locked. Oh, and one of them would be locked at 30 hertz. So the only way to run a powerful triple 4K system would be using 2 R9 295X2s. Is this something you'd like to see? Drop us a comment if you would. Is this the type of system for everyone? No. In fact, triple or quadruple card setups rarely are. The performance scaling drops off dramatically, and the improvement from a third to a fourth card in particular is less than 20%. If you're building showcase systems, or you have just like, you know, way too much money to spend on awesome bragging rights, it's perfect. But for most use cases, we still recommend going with the single most powerful card you can afford and adding a second one if you need a little bit more gusto. It produced some impressive results, but what we didn't show was the hours spent, you know, configuring the system, you know, and figuring out the crossfire profiles and getting everything working. Not to mention the thermal throttling when using non-liquid cooled setups is actually potentially a big problem when you're sandwiching cards together like this, especially if you're not using a case that has adequate airflow. So in this case, it's an open bench, but even in that situation, I would recommend putting a fan like right over top of all the cards. Thank you guys very much for watching this crazy Crossfire shenanigans video. Comment below, what's the most cards you've ever had in your rig? Are you a solo kind of guy? Double, triple, quad? Let us know what kind of crazy Crossfire or SLI setups you've tried. And as always, don't forget to subscribe.